Welcome to this short video about how managers and entrepreneurs can use the information about costs to help answer some of the questions they might have about a business. Just a reminder of what we're probably trying to achieve, which is to make a profit. So expenses reduce profit or reduce the wealth of the business owner or owners. Now, most costs are also expenses, including all the costs we will be covering in this video. Right, managers and entrepreneurs have questions about their business, such as how much will we spend in the next period, which of our options will maximise profit, is our plan a good plan? And looking at cost and contribution information can help answer these questions. So starting with how much will we spend in the next period. So we're going to forecast this. We're going to forecast our costs. And to do this, it helps to know what type of activity gives rise to a cost. And costs can be broken down into 4 types. The unit level costs are the ones that are just things you must spend in order to produce 1 unit of output. So if you're baking a loaf of bread, you need some flour. The batch level is things you need, extra things that you need if you're doing a batch of loaves, or things that can only be spread out over a batch. So in the case of loaves, they usually break loads of them in the oven at one time, so that cost is not a unit cost, it's a batch cost. And then you've got costs related to the product or the product range, so perhaps creating the recipe for a loaf. And then facility sustaining, things that are required to keep the business ticking over, like the general manager's salary. The last 3 we're going to group together, so we're just going to look at unit level costs and the others all grouped together. So the pattern of costs for not spend on non-unit costs as you make more and more units goes like this. So what happens is that after you reach a certain level of output, you have to spend a bit more money. Maybe you have to get an extra machine, and then after a while something else comes along. Perhaps you have to hire an extra supervisor, and then it stays level for a while. The unit level costs, however, are quite different, and they behave like this. Every extra unit you require increases your cost by the same amount each time. At least we assume it's the same amount each time. So we've got the 2 types of cost. How do we forecast the cost? You need to add the 2 together. It's the total unit level costs and the total non-unit level costs. And the unit level costs will be the cost per unit multiplied by the number of units. Now, for the non-unit level costs, we have a useful situation here. So for modest changes in output, say in the white area on the graph here, the non-unit level cost won't change. So we can pretty much just keep using the same number all the time. So here's an example, a wholesaler of face masks. Last month they sold 10,000 and their costs, the unit level costs were £2 and the non-unit level costs were 30,000. They think they can sell 11,000 next month, but that won't change their non-unit level costs. It's not a big enough change to require an extra machine or anything like that. So the non-unit level costs are still in here at £30,000. The unit level costs we calculate as 11,000 units at £2 each, £22,000. So we've now forecast that our expenditure next month will be £52,000. And that's answered our question. The relative proportion of unit level and non-unit costs in an organisation is called the cost structure of a business. And this provides a trade-off between risk and reward. So here's a graph, and there's two examples here, the extreme examples. So one, the black line assumes that all the costs are non-unit level, so they go up in steps, as we saw before. And the blue one assumes that all the costs are unit level costs. And obviously the red line is the revenue. Now over on the left, we've got a problem here with the non-unit costs because the revenue is below the cost, so you're making a loss. Okay, with the unit level costs, the red line's above the blue line, so that there's no time where you're making a loss there. So that makes the non-unit levels very risky. However, if you look on the right-hand side, what happens is that the gap between the costs and the profit has got a lot bigger for the non-unit costs than it has for the unit. So the opportunity for reward is greater for the non-unit level costs. So you've got the risk and reward are greater with the most non-unit costs. And any combination of unit and non-unit is going to be somewhere in between the blue line and the black line. Okay, so the one on the left here, labour and materials, pretty much most of their costs, pretty much unit costs for bricklaying. That's going to be the blue line, if you like. The one on the right, oil, chemical plant or oil refinery or something like that, most of their costs go up in steps. So if they get a lot of volume, they're going to make a lot of profit. If they get very little volume, they've still got all this stuff. They've got to maintain it. They've got wear and tear and so on. They've got very high costs and not much revenue. We can quantify the cost structure. In the example we looked at before, the non-unit level costs were 30,000. The total was 52. So the non-unit level costs were 58% of the total costs. And this 58% is called the operating gearing percentage. Right, moving on to the next question, which of our options will maximise profit? Now, as we've seen, for many operating decisions, the non-unit level costs won't change. So we can ignore those in the short term. And we can seek to minimise the unit level costs or maximise contribution. Now, in order to do that, obviously you need to know what we mean by contribution. So contribution is sales revenue minus the unit level costs. It's similar to profit, but it's obviously not the same. And the difference between contribution and profit is the non-unit level costs. So if you know the contribution, you can calculate the profit. Right, so look at this example here. You've got two options, A and B, the revenue, the unit level costs. The non-unit level costs, we can ignore those because we just know they're equal. So it makes no difference for this decision. And B is the better one because B minimises the unit level costs. Now, this example is more difficult, okay, because it's not just the unit level costs that change here, it's also the revenue. So minimising the unit level costs may not answer my question. So what we do here is we work out the contribution. So option C, 280 minus 200 is 80. Option D, 250 minus 180 is 70. So option C gives us the bigger contribution, which is what we want. So notice that's not the one with the smaller unit level costs. So operating decisions using these techniques, typically things like this on here. We'll just look at one of them. We'll look at an example of short-term pricing. So here's a business selling wheelchairs. Here's their current plan to make a profit of £400,000. Now they've got a competitor who's got a problem. So one of their customers has asked Netherby to do an extra job for them, and they want £80. So they want to buy some wheelchairs for £80. Netherby's got the capacity to do this without affecting their ongoing business and without increasing their non-unit level costs. So they've got two options here. They can either accept the order or just continue on without this order. So remember the rule. We're going to have a look at the contribution. What does this do to the contribution? So there's the original budget on the left, which we've already seen, and then on the right we've made the changes. Okay, so we've ignored the non-unit level cost, but the revenue is going to go up by the extra amount they're paying, and we've got to buy some extra unit level costs, which were £50 each. I think that was apparent in the original budget. The original budget was 6,000 units for £300,000, so we knew they were £50 each. So the contribution was 600,000, and it would go up to £603,000. So you would probably accept this because it will increase your contribution, although you wouldn't do it if this in some way could affect your long-term pricing or your other sales, because other customers, if they found out about it, might expect the same low price. So you have to be careful. Right, moving on to another of the questions. Is our plan a good plan? And one of the things to think about then is there a risk, or what is the risk of not making a profit? Okay. So if you just don't make a profit, you make exactly zero profit, the business is said to be breaking even, and the level at which you do that is your break-even point. So that's what we're looking at here. So when will a business break even? It will break even when the contribution is equal to the non-unit level costs. Okay, how do I know that? Okay, the break even is when the profit is zero. We have this formula for contribution being linked to profit. And so if the profit is zero, then contribution minus non-unit level cost is zero, which means the contribution must equal the non-unit level costs. Okay, so we know what the contribution is. It would be much more useful to know what the revenue is at break even. How much do we have to sell in order to break even? And to do that, we need to look at the link between the contribution and the profit. So here's an example. There's a business here selling goods for £8,000 and they paid £6,000. So the contribution is £2,000. And £8,000 is 400% of the contribution. So the revenue is 400%. So let's try a different one. If I've increased the sales by 25%, goes up to 10,000, the costs will go up. The unit level costs will go up by 25% to 7,500. The contribution, therefore, is 2,500, which is also means that the sales revenue is 400% of the contribution. Okay. So what happens is that as sales go up or go down, revenue will always be the same percentage of contribution. So let's go back to our example of Student Limited. Their non-unit level costs were £3,000. Therefore, at break even, their contribution is going to be £3,000. Their revenue is 400% of the contribution, so it's going to be £12,000. Okay, so in order to break even, they need to have revenue of £12,000. If you remember, this business started off at a revenue of £8,000. So It was a startup business, so their plan would need to show a significant increase in the not too distant future for this to be a good plan. Right, I hope you found this video useful. Further details can be found in the book by Ralph Whitaker. Thank you.